What's up, everyone?
What's going on?
Man, it's almost Thanksgiving.
I know, almost Jesus given.
Yeah, exactly right.
Before we got on air, me and Logan were talking about how we've had time recently just to loaf, just to do nothing. It's been pretty awesome.
It has been nice, man. I don't hardly do that very much, but sometimes it's good to do.
Well, I didn't have to write a sermon last week, so
You were with us.
I did a little bit.
I mean,
of loafing.
you only work one day a week anyway.
A couple hours,
right?
Yeah.
That's all it is. Yeah. That's it. Welcome to another episode of Reverent and Rebellious. I'm sitting in between Reverent and Rebellious right now.
Who's who?
I don't know on any given day. So as we're getting started, remember what we got to do.
You need to hit that like button, hit subscribe, hit the little bell.
The bell.
And leave us a comment. Look, we appreciate them. Bubba left us a ha-ha.
Yes, he did.
We don't know if that's a good ha-ha-ha or a bad one, but we don't care.
I'm taking it that he's probably saying he's on my side with the aliens.
He probably is.
Yeah.
He probably
Did you hear
is.
that ha-ha-ha I just did? So, yeah, I don't know about that.
Well, there you go, guys. Do those things. And if you're listening on Spotify, leave us a rating. Leave us a rating. And you can you had a poll. Have you put any other stuff up?
I just asked a question last time.
Okay.
Yeah. And
You can answer the questions on there.
Answer the question. Sometimes there's a poll on there. It's a lot of fun. We got several responses to the poll. It was fun. And and you can write us a review as well.
Yeah.
And I have to update. We're getting closer and closer to being out on all of the podcast channels.
All right.
So
all right. Then we'll be big time.
I think we're probably a week or two away.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There you go, guys.
I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about having all these awesome conversations.
I am too.
Yeah.
Because we've been having a good time, and boy, we just been kind of brainstorming, and there is just an infinite amount of subject matter.
It is.
that we can cover.
So that means you are stuck with this
You
for
are
the
stuck.
unforeseeable future.
Yes.
Absolutely. So this week we're going to kind of riff off of what we've been going with the aliens and the creatures and the Halloween stuff and everything, and we're going to talk about something that is at times been very controversial.
Hey.
What?
Bad joke.
Oh, yeah,
You're
I
trying to
forgot.
skip out again.
I was looking for a good...
I got
Segue.
I got a good one. I got a good one too. Okay, well, we'll get to the controversial subject in just a second. Okay, but there were these three guys that were that had an apartment together. Okay, they're roommates, and they all worked at the same place, and they were all pretty close. So they decided they didn't have enough money to each buy a car, so they bought one car for the three of them, and they were just going to share it.
Okay.
And one was a Catholic guy, and one was a Pentecostal guy, and one was a Jewish guy.
Oh.
And so they bought this car together, and they gathered up together, and they said, okay, now we're all going to share this car, which means that we're not going to bring our religion into this. So I don't want to see Bibles on the front seat. I don't want to see nothing hanging from the mirror or anything like that. And so they all agreed, and everything's okay. Well, it's late at night, and one of them hears a noise outside. He goes to the window, and there's the Catholic guy around the car sprinkling holy water on it. It's like, oh no, this is terrible. So they just kind of let it go. And the next night, it's late at night, and one of the guy gets up and he looks out the window, and the Pentecostal guy's laying hands on the car, and he's speaking in tongues over the car. It's like, shoot, we agreed not to do that. And so then the next night, it's late at night, and one guy wakes up and he walks out there, hears this terrible noise, and the Jewish guy is sawing 2 inches off the tailpipe.
That's good. That's good. As soon as you said Jew, Catholic, and Pentecostal, I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. Dad joke.
That's a pretty
There you
good one.
That's
That
good.
is.
Yeah. So anyway, controversial subject.
Controversial.
Yes, it's a lot of ambiguity in this.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any dinosaurs in this one, though.
I'm not sure either. But we are going to talk today about near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. So there has been, let's just say there are thousands and thousands and thousands of reports of these kinds of things.
Yeah, medically documented.
That's right.
Movies made about them. Yeah.
Books.
So I want to start. I've got this. There was this book that I picked up a while back, and it's not just one experience after another. There's a lot of research and study coming at it from more of a research based approach. But I want to read you this account. And I want to see what you guys think about it. Okay. And then you can kind of weigh in, and we'll explore to what degree we think these things are legit and real, and not just a figment of somebody's imagination. So here's the way this book opens in chapter 1. It says, for an entire week, Santosh, whatever his last name is, he's a foreign guy. I don't know who he is. Had been fighting for his life. He realized he was dying. He had just given his wife, son, and daughter-in-law his final blessing when he went into cardiac arrest. The medical staff rushed into action to get his heart going again, but their efforts failed. He clinically died. And here's his thoughts. He says, I always thought that once you die, your life is finished. That's it. But when I died, I discovered your life isn't over. There's another life after that. I realized I'm not dead. I can analyze, interpret. I was curious and wondering as I saw a bright light coming toward me. I could see my body lying on the hospital bed. This light was so bright. I knew that this light has superior authority. I had to obey that light. No one had to tell me. I just knew. When the light came near me, he engulfed me with his radiance, and all that I could see was the divine light. I immediately fell in love with the divine light. I knew the light's purpose was not to harm me, but protect me. I felt safe. Now, this guy is a Hindu guy.
Okay.
He's a Hindu guy, grew up in India, and it tells a story about his condition and everything. But he says, I remember passing through some black holes like big round tunnels at tremendous speed. Together we traveled for quite some time. When the light stopped, he was still looking at me, and I was looking at him as well. I was wondering, why did the light stop moving? What do I do now? I was seeing that the light stopped inside a large compound that was surrounded with very high and extraordinarily beautiful walls. So he starts to describe all of this stuff, and he realizes, he says, I counted 12 gates all around this city, but none of the gates were open for me. I wanted to go inside, but I could not go inside. I was just outside of the gate. I saw many angels there. I knew these angels were there to protect this beautiful compound, and I realized I'm looking at the kingdom of heaven. Nothing in this world could ever come close to the beauty of this place. It all looked so peaceful and so calm, I instantly fell in love with it. And then he says, there has to be an entrance somewhere. How do I get into this beautiful place? And then he calls him the light, the Lord. He somehow knows it's the Lord. The Lord spoke to me. He has a very deep, commanding voice, but at the same time, I noticed his voice was also a loving one. When the Lord spoke, I could understand what he said in any of the languages that I know. Bengali, English, Hindi, German, Portuguese. He knows all these languages. He says, I'm sending you back to the earth. Go back and complete your unfinished tasks. When you are back, I want you to love your family and love your children. Pay attention to your daughter. She needs your help. We talked for a long time. I didn't know how long it was. I didn't know who he was, except that he was God. I didn't have to ask or find out. I knew this was the Lord of everything, Lord of all. He was kind, loving, like a true friend with genuine concern for each and every one of us, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's more to the story, but he later discovers one very narrow gate that he said was open to him. Through it, he could see a way into the kingdom of heaven. And so that was his experience. He came alive. He went back to his life. He was, as you can imagine, quite different after that.
Yeah.
So, Pat, what's your first impression of a story like that?
It is very similar to every near-death experience that I have heard of, that I have researched, and that I've just randomly come across. It always involves leaving your body, seeing a light, and it's not only seeing the light, they feel the light. They can, and it's funny, is every one of them says the same thing. I saw this light, and I knew it was God.
Yeah.
Every one of them. And this goes to show, too, this guy was a Hindu.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was about to ask. Like, what is it? Because I don't know Hindu belief.
Hindus believe in many gods. Mm-hmm. They're in
polytheistic,
and there are levels of. They don't really call it heaven, but there's an afterlife, and there are levels. And
so, do you think he was seeing So would afterwards, I wonder if he's still Hindu, or would he does he recognize, like when he's saying God, is that the big G God that we recognize?
Well, later on he will say yes.
Okay.
Because he, at one point he asks himself the question when he comes back to life. He says, well, why didn't I see all these other gods
So am I busting a spoiler out here?
No, not really, because this is kind of the trajectory of the whole thing.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, some of these common experiences and how in detail they get and how specific they get.
It's funny that you said he gave him a series of tasks to do when he comes back. Because I was researching this guy, and he's got a very elaborate story. His name is Vincent Todd Tolman.
Yeah.
And he's got a very, very long story that we're not going to dive into all of it.
Right.
But essentially, the guy was dead for over an hour. When they found him, he was dead in a public restroom. They put him in a body bag. And this guy said he could feel himself coming out of his body, and he was looking around, and he saw this light in one of the paramedics, and he could hear what was going on in the guy's head. And the guy said, this one's not dead. And it was a light. And then he said, I knew that was the Holy Spirit talking to him. And he said, then the light got brighter and said, this guy is not dead. And so he said the paramedic broke protocol and started checking him for a pulse and stuff. But anyways, so he has this encounter with a light as well, and he gives him 10 things that he must do. And they're basically lessons. The first one was be authentic. He said, we have different versions of ourselves. We have the church you, the work you, the family you. It has to be real. And it's funny the way he lays these out, too. The second one is life is a school. It's a schoolroom. It's not a courtroom. We're learning the presence of God because we cannot understand God if it was not an option for us to choose. The third thing was love. And this is what confused me, is because he said, you think love would be first. But if you don't understand yourself and you don't understand that you're seeking for God, can you truly love someone?
That's a good point.
So I was with him there, and the fourth thing was your inner voice, which is the Holy Spirit. Learn to listen to it, not just hear it. The fifth thing is our relationship to technology.
Wow.
And this was really cool, too. He said that we can rather worship technology, or it can be a tool that helps our worship. And he said if it's tearing you, and if you don't know if it's tearing you down or lifting you up, it means it's tearing you down.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And the sixth,
as we sit here and communicate over technology.
the sixth one was release prejudice. And that was really interesting part that he said. He said, I was telling this guy, he's like, yeah, I cannot stand racism. I cannot stand bigotry. I cannot stand all this stuff. He's like, I have 2 Korean adopted sisters. He's like, I'm not a racist guy. And he said that the light kind of just brought him in close and said, but how do you feel about prejudiced people? And he said, the guy was like, oh, they're the worst, blah, blah, blah. He says, yeah, you got to deal with them too.
Okay.
And
Point
then
well taken.
The seventh thing was we have to control our thoughts. Because thoughts are creations.
Yeah.
We create things with our thoughts. And then 8 was avoid negative influences. Because if you have negative influences, it would give you negative thoughts.
Yeah.
The 9th thing was evil has a purpose. If evil was not on the planet, we would not have anything to choose. There would be no option. It would be only choose good.
That's right.
And so we couldn't choose good.
Yep.
We would be a slave to good.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is we are all one. We're not one race, not one nation, one belief. We're one humanity.
Yep.
And that's what our love's supposed to be about, is one people of God.
Interesting thing, as you're going through this list, I can think of a scripture for every single one of those. I mean, it just popped into my head.
That's what blew my mind. And when I went through those 10 things, I was like, okay, like this guy was dead for over an hour. And God basically told him, he said, you're not done. He's like, you have to go back. You have to do these things. And so he wrote a book about it.
So what about you, Logan? What do you think about all this stuff?
Well, that's what, while I'm listening to that, I don't know, the part that I think about is, one, I'm like, I feel like the struggle is, if we go and we get a glimpse of heaven, would we even want to come back?
Well, actually, that's another spoiler alert. Many of them beg to stay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
This guy, that's what he was saying, that he was actually depressed when he came back. because he's like, I knew what was waiting for me.
Yeah.
And he said it felt like home. He knew that he couldn't go home until he was called home.
Could you imagine the relief of anxiety, though? Man, if I came back and I had done seen heaven, and I was like, man, look at this. Like, I know, I mean, and we ought to live this way anyways.
I know. That's it.
We ought to live this way. But, like, you know, if you get to see the awesomeness and it's like, you know, you get a weird pain in your stomach, you're like, maybe it'll kill me. Yeah.
No. Well, interesting thing, though, you know, because Paul talks about this a lot. Because Paul went through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he was beaten and left for dead. He was, you know, shipwrecked twice. He was flogged. He was, I mean, every other day, Paul was, you know, just getting trashed.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of times when he says, you know, well, the most famous time he says, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain.
Yep.
Yep.
And then he'll say things like, you know, I'd really rather die.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I'm going to live, I'm going to try to be of benefit to you.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's part of me that just really wants to check out.
Oh,
Yeah.
what scripture is he worded that way? He said to be absent of the body is present in the Father, but it's better that I be in the flesh right now. Like, he's just so bummed
like
out
a
about it.
teenager.
Yeah.
Feel like, well, so the interesting part to me, and this is sharing one of the little snippets here I had wrote down. So, and I'll share the statistic: 1 out of 10 people claim to have had an out of body
I
experience.
know that's crazy.
That is. But the part that stands out to me. So the dude was a Hindu that you shared.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what that guy's faith was.
He was an unbeliever.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, this is what's interesting. Why? Because when I was kind of researching for this episode, it said that some people have hellish visions.
It's true.
And so these guys, see, my initial reaction would be like, well, they were unbelievers and they were shown basically where they're going to go. But if this dude was a Hindu, this other guy was not a believer, well, they're not believers.
Yeah.
So why were they shown the vision of what they would interpret as heaven versus these other people are shown a hellish vision?
Well,
If it is a divine vision.
This is, again, this is my placard here. This is nothing but Pat's belief. I think it's because God knew that was not their finality. That was not their end.
Yeah.
right.
And I think that's him saying, look,
It's time.
here's the truth.
Yeah.
You're going back. I want you to end up here.
Yeah.
And
Are you meaning like God knew, like at some point in their life, they're going to have this wake up call that's going to shift them to the faith, and this just happens to be it?
Well, I mean, think about it. How many times have any of us in our walk have moments of God before we got saved?
Yeah.
How many times have we had people try to share the faith with us and we just weren't having it?
Yeah.
Like I had 30 years worth of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it's people are going to be like the way their whole life. So God just will say, if you're not going to listen, I will talk to you.
And some people will try to say, okay, well, God engineered that car wreck and then just so we could have that encounter and everything. I don't think God needs to do that. No. I think that, but you know, God says, oh, there's an opportunity.
Yep.
Okay. I feel like that's a dangerous way to think.
Yeah.
When people think like, well, God made this car wreck happen. Because in the same, then there would be people that would, like, if they lose a child to cancer, they'd be like, God is trying to teach me something.
No.
And it's like, nope, God is not going to take your child away in that moment.
Sometime last year, Peter did a sermon, and he was saying, God holds out for the greater glory.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I really think that plays into this right here is whenever tragedy happens, God is still there. Yeah. And he will use that tragedy. He doesn't create the tragedy to show his glory.
Well, and we were talking about the man who was born blind. Mm-hmm. And the disciples instantly went to, well, who sinned?
Yeah.
Did he sin or did his parents sin?
Yeah.
It's like, nobody.
Yeah.
Didn't they do Job the same way? They were like, what have you done?
Oh, they spent 42 chapters telling him what a sorry person
all of
he
his
was.
friends.
Oh, my
all of his
gosh.
friends.
Oh, yeah. His friends. His friends were honestly, it's so funny at the book of Job, because all of his friends come and they sit with them, which is a very friendly thing to do.
Yeah.
And then they cease to become friends the second they open their mouth.
Yes. Oh, they're awful.
Look,
like if they'd have just sat there, everything would have been okay.
I've had religious people tell me before, whenever things have went wrong, people have told me, well, you must have unrepentant sin in your life.
I know. Quit doing that. Stop doing that.
Yeah, I'm
that's
like, where
not
are you
good.
getting this from? Like, that's
like I said,
not how this works.
It makes God look like almost like a bully.
Yeah.
In heaven, it's like hey, how much do you love me? I'm gonna put some horrible moments in your life.
I got a whole one of the subjects we'll cover in the future is all of the killing in the Old Testament, all of the massacre and genocide and everything else like that, and things like plagues and famines, evil spirits that were, the language in the Old Testament is that they are sent by God.
The wrath.
But I've got a whole study that by these experts in the Hebrew language that will show us why it's worded that way.
Oh man, we're gonna really shake the boat.
We are absolutely.
I like it.
How dare you go back to the original language to make sense of all this? How dare you?
It better be King James version. Oh, hey,
that's right.
So my other question on this, on the hellish vision.
Yeah.
So is that basically God being like, look, bro, I know you ain't coming to the light.
No.
I'm going to show you where you're headed.
It's just like Logan just wants to go right to the hellish part.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued because of the difference.
Okay, let's go there.
God's like, look, I'm going to scare you to death. I'm going to send you back. And he's like, this is what you get to wait for.
Okay, I'm gonna find it right now. It's page 102 here.
Oh, he's got it bookmarked. He's ready.
Dang, look at all those pages.
He knew you were going.
He was like, what's the weird part here? Because that's where Logan's going to go.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
As I drink my liquid death over here.
Death, I know. So while I'm looking this page up, like with the aliens and the werewolves, are you wanting to have a near-death experience?
Well, if it's a near-death, no, because that would mean that I am nearly dead.
I will say this: would I like to see this? My answer is hell no.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
It's mostly dead. Only mostly dead.
Exactly.
No. I think I'd rather just save this splendor for when the moment finally comes.
You don't want a two-blade.
No, I don't want to I don't want a combine to roll over the top of me and I have a near-death experience from it.
Okay. So, I'm trying to find the exact place here because I think that when I was reading it on my computer, the page numbers turned out to be different. But I'm gonna. Gosh, where is it?
I'm gonna move this insulation off the table here.
Oh yeah. People are gonna think it's like an alien egg. Or
yeah,
something like that.
I might have some of that stuff around here, but I can't be giving out all my secrets.
What's really interesting though about
okay, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say about the hell or the heaven experiences people have is, like I said, it's never a final spot.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there are some allusions in here in this book to people who just saw hell and went there.
Yeah.
I mean, does
he describe that?
Well, no. But, the illusion is like one of these guys has a near-death experience. He meets God. God shows him. This is what often happens. I'm going to get to the commonalities here in a minute, but a common thing is that God gives you like a movie reel of your life.
Yeah. Highlight reel.
Yeah, and you get to see all the good and the bad and the ugly, and then sometimes gives you a vision of hell, like this is where you're headed, and the feeling is always this is where I deserve to be.
Yeah,
and then God offers the alternative. From
gotcha.
That. Yeah, but in one of these encounters, the guy asks, well, what about the people? Do you give everybody this shot? And it's like, no, I want to, you know, I love all of my children, but sometimes, I mean, this is what they've chosen. And this is, so that's kind of that deal. But here's this woman named Erica. She says, one moment I stood with God, and the next, the absence of his unconditional love was obvious. This was hell. And this is how she describes it. They were criticizing and judging each other. It kind of sounds like Earth.
Tipton County.
There were angry and jealous conversations full of gossip and spitefulness. These conversations were the exact opposite of the unconditional love and acceptance that emanated from God. Along with the conversations came the most extreme emotions of sadness, anger, hatred, loneliness, jealousy, self-loathing, unworthiness, and everything that you can imagine that was negative. I can't even find a human word to explain the degree of sheer terror I felt.
Wow.
Isn't that it's crazy, the polar opposite of the two visions. Because both of them, the first one, they talked about the light and how they had no fear. That was part that stood out. Like, because even like when the angels would appear, they're always like, do not be afraid.
Yeah.
And like in this moment, they see the light and there is no fear. They don't even have to be told to not be afraid. They just don't feel any
That's
fear.
That's what I was sitting here thinking is, what's really curious is that your feelings are your feelings, right?
Yeah.
But they're only dictated by the presence of the light.
Yeah.
By the presence of God. In the presence of God, it's all this happy, unconditional love. Like there's no words to explain this comfort that you have. But the first thing he said is you can immediately tell the absence.
That's it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about this one is this woman is a Christian.
When she had this.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
She must have been Baptist.
Says, there you go.
I'm just playing.
But here's why God showed her this. Says God then gave her a download of understanding. He wanted her to warn people and let them know what Jesus meant when he said, "It's not my heavenly Father's will that even one of these little ones should perish." And she says, God wanted me to see and understand the magnitude of what he was trying to explain in heaven. I received the knowledge that God did not put those people there. They put themselves there by choosing separation from God and his love. With the gift of free will, they chose separation from him. After the unconditional love I felt from God, why would anybody want to be separate from that? Once again, I felt the depth of God's sadness, knowing that he had to allow those souls to disconnect from him. And so, there you go.
I appreciate that because I feel like some people look at God as like this mean guy that sends people to hell.
Yeah. God sends no one to hell.
Yeah. And, in that right there where she says she could sense the sadness of God for like that people are going to hell. You choose to go to hell. So
that's right.
Like the sadness that he would feel in that, it kind of stands out to me. So now we're breaking this stuff down, but I guess my plain Jane question would be, is it real? Because that's the question. I told y'all off air. Yeah. I've talked to a couple people about this, and the common thing is there's like, I just don't. Both people have told me they don't think that they see heaven, and which their argument would be, you would not come back. But like we said, they didn't want to, and God's like, well, thumps them back into earth or reality. But what are your thoughts on that? How would you break it down?
Well, it's as to whether or not they're real. This is one of the chapters he goes into in pretty good detail, and this is a good time for this. Now, the skeptics, there are a lot of medical professionals and psychologists and people like this that would say, they have been saying for years, that the main argument is that right before someone passes, it's like their brain does a download. Yeah. And like expels all of its sort of pent up information and energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when they then are resuscitated, then it all sort of, comes rushing back, all the, brain cells and are activated again and everything else like that. And they can remember what happened as they were expiring. That's the common perception of that. Others will say that it's a hallucination.
Yeah. The brain is flooded with dopamine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you get
now, have y'all ever been choked out?
Yes.
No.
I have been choked out, and when I came back to, I did not have a grand vision. So I would argue with him.
My ears were ringing.
Yeah. I remember like I was kind of on the ground and I could feel the like surge of oxygen returning to my brain.
Yep.
So,
okay. So there's this doctor, Dr. Party, P-A-R-T-I. And
sounds like a fun guy.
I know. Party, he knows how to party. But the interesting thing is he's a surgeon, and he describes how he felt. He heard one after another of these kind of near-death experience, accounts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so he tells of one experience that he goes back in. There's a guy that he operated on, and he died, and he was resuscitated and everything. And the patient says, "I was watching you guys in the operating room. I was out of my body, floating around by the ceiling." And he says, that can't be true. He says, yeah, I saw you just standing at the head of the table. I saw the surgeon sewing the patch on my artery. The patient told Dr. Party how many surgeons he'd seen. He described the nurses, the medical team's actions during the operation, and the other details that could only have been observed from somewhere above them all. And so over the years, he's overseen hundreds of surgeries in which the patient's heart stopped or barely beat. He heard all of these things, but he had never heard an account like this where there were details. Mm-hmm. He says, your heart was stopped. Your brain didn't have any activity. You couldn't have seen anything. And this was a particular kind of surgery where they bring the body temperature down to like 50 degrees.
Wow.
It's a last ditch attempt, So he said, your head was packed in ice. They were calling him the frozen man. But the patient just continued to describe more details from his operation, including tools doctors had used and what they said during the surgery. And finally, he stopped him and gave him a shot of an antipsychotic drug. It's like, no, you did not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He men in blacked him.
And here's another, this doctor grew up in a Hindu family. And so the interesting thing is, the day after Christmas, 2010, he had his own experience.
Wow.
Yeah. He found himself lying.
The same guy?
The doctor.
The doctor.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. He found
Don't believe me?
Uh-huh.
Watch this.
Yeah. He found himself lying in the recovery room of the UCLA Medical Center talking to an anesthesiologist about his own near-death experience. The whatever. Can't say that right now. He either didn't believe him or he didn't care. He said, I saw you during my surgery. He said, really? Yes, I left my body and watched you from the ceiling. Interesting, fumbling through his papers. No, really. Explaining how he watched the surgeon cut him open and even heard that an anesthesiologist tell a joke. Oh, really? And what was the joke? So he retold the crude joke about the smell after his intestines had been opened. How about that?
Oh.
And so the guy blushes, mumbling that he must not have given him enough anesthesia. Dr. Party reassured him that he had given him plenty. And then he started telling him about his experience. He visited his mom and sister in India, found himself on the edge of hell, and the doctor became very uncomfortable. He said he would come back to hear more of the story, but he never came back. And he wasn't the only one to dismiss Dr. Party's experience that day. When the surgeon came in, he recounted his out-of-body observations, his journey, got all the way to the tunnel entrance before the surgeon reached for his phone and excused himself. So when a resident physician came in, he started peppering him with questions about the healing of the soul, and he explained to him how two angels from the Bible took him to a being of light who discussed healing the soul. The resident quickly ended the conversation. And so basically he couldn't convince his own colleagues of what he had just seen, but he immediately then came to be a believer.
So I'll tell you my thoughts on this real quick too. I almost think it's easier for me. Part of the reason why I can get on board with some of this stuff is because I'm a pretty simple guy.
Right.
I feel like, and I mean, I don't say that negatively, but like I feel like when people go into maybe the medical field or, they get into the advanced sciences and things, then everything has to be explainable.
Yeah.
Right.
And when anything comes to the supernatural or this, where it's like can't be something that they can we need proof on the paper, this and that, I feel like they almost have a harder time with it.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, knowledge and wisdom are not synonymous.
Yeah, and that's not an attack if we got some scientists in the crowd here, but it's interesting to me. Yeah, almost the more, I guess, what knowledge you gain, the harder it is, the more or the less open you are to
For sure.
things like this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And you get this feeling that, just give science a little more time.
Yeah.
And a few more tools and resources, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But it brings up a bigger question. So not only are they real, and we'll get into some of these other common factors here in a minute, but does this give us actual scientific evidence for the existence of a soul?
Yeah.
And for the existence of God.
I mean, I would have to say yes.
And not just any God, but
The God.
the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
that's the big question. And I think that's also one reason why the skeptics just don't really want to go there, because it really is just a very, very short jump then to say, well, not only is there a God, but God is God.
Right. Yeah,
it's the one true God. And that for some people is a very, very scary place to be.
Well, I feel like we got to share the little story about the doctor that Boss Bruton talks about.
Yeah.
I feel like it, because at first when you were telling that one story, I'm like, is that story? For people that aren't familiar, Boss Rutan, UFC fighter.
Yeah.
He was a bad dude. Still a bad dude. I wouldn't want to get into a fight with him. He had like a video series on YouTube, how to win a bar fight or something for a little while. But he's a Christian. And I've told them we've been doing all of our interesting topics. So my YouTube search has been very strange.
I know, blown sky high.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So I was on
Got
YouTube.
some messed up algorithms.
Yeah, my algorithms are never going to recover. But they were weird anyways. Who am I talking about? Who am I kidding? But anyways, so they had a clip on their Boss put out that why he came back to the faith. And it did not say in the top, like the title, it really didn't give much information, just said why I came back to the faith.
Yeah, that's it.
And so I dove into it. It's about 30 minutes long. I watched it. I had to send it to y'all because Boss talks about this. He had quite a bit of supernatural or paranormal encounters in his life. And but there was this doctor, and I can't remember if it was in the 80s or the 90s, but he said that he was basically like our Dr. Party here, and he was doing these traumatic surgeries and things, and he would lose a patient, and they'd come back, and they'd be like, I saw what you did. And he'd say, that's just not, you
not
didn't.
possible.
Yeah, you just think you knew what was going on, whatever. But some of them would describe like the artery and stuff so much. So this dude actually took, like, from my understanding what Boss was saying, he took like basically black electrical tape, and he put little shapes in the room, but it'd be where you would only see them from above.
Right.
So like you'd basically have to be looking down from up on the ceiling.
Yep.
And he hid these shapes in the room. It'd be like a square over on the top of the lampshade or a triangle over here. And sure enough, he had another person do that, and he started kind of questioning them. And he was like, did you notice anything weird? And they're like, well, I don't know. And he said, did you see any weird shapes? And they were like, well, now that you say that, there was a triangle or something on top of the lampshade. And so they actually started to see these things and he did not tell anybody who's doing this. And so, I mean, that led Boss immediately to say, okay, then we have a soul. Because you're out of your body looking down. He's like, so we have a soul. If we have a soul, then there has to be God.
That's this guy's story. I keep forgetting his name. But his story is his soul that he encountered on the way to heaven was this guy named Drake. And so he's like, Drake, like, I don't know Drake. And anyways, when he got back here, he was in this history exhibit in his hometown. And he sees his face and he's like, that's the guy that I saw when, I was transported. And he had the same name, the same last name as his grandmother's maiden name.
Wow.
So he went and asked his grandma, he's like, who is this guy? Blah, blah, blah. And she said, that's my great-grandfather, Drake. And he said it blew his mind because, like, he never would have ever known this guy from anything.
There's a story in here. This young woman dies, and she has a similar experience. But she has one of those experiences where you meet a lot of people that you know. You know, she meets an old friend who died prematurely, all this stuff. And then she was talking to her mother, months later, and she said, "I met this younger man, and he came up and hugged me, but I have no idea who this guy is." And her mother said, "Well, see, I had this affair that was legit. She
met her dad.
She showed a picture of her biological dad. She says, yeah, that's the guy that came up and hugged me.
That is crazy.
I know.
I wonder how that reunion goes.
I know.
When you get up to heaven, it's like, guess who's dead, sucker? Come here, float over here and check this out.
Guess who made it to heaven?
Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
So all right, so then I'm looking at this from the flip side of the scope. Not from hell. I know that's what y'all are thinking. No. So from the people.
I don't want to go there. I just want to see it.
From a safe distance.
Exactly.
Now, so the people in heaven,
Yeah.
when they see these visions, I mean, is this God? Because this was one of the things that I look up. Some people say that it's visions God is allowing them. Like they're not actually witnessing these things as much as God's just giving them a vision.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if some of these people is God like, if someone's dead and in heaven, is he going and saying, hey, Tom.
Yeah, come on out here.
Yeah, your daughter just died in a car wreck. I want you to meet her.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. I can't answer that, but I do know that some of these encounters have been physical.
Really?
That they've actually touched each other and hugged each other. And so whether that's a perception, I mean, it could very well be a perception.
Yeah.
God can do anything like that. So I'm cool with all of the explanations. But here's the interesting thing. There are attempts at alternate explanations for these near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. But here's the funny thing about it. He says over 30 alternate explanations for NDEs have been proposed over the years. Okay, so 30 possible explanations. He asked the question, why so many? Why are there so many possible explanations?
Because they all keep getting disproven?
Well, I mean, this guy, Dr. Long, says skeptics themselves as a group can't come up with any consensus explanation of near-death experience. If skeptics had one or even a couple of explanations that made sense, you wouldn't need over 30.
Yeah.
They have nothing that explains the totality of what we're observing in near-death experience. And here's the other, let me just read it a little bit more. Alternate explanations typically try to explain away one or two elements, but they never take into account all common elements that together make a strong scientific case. And here's the other part of it too, is we talk about this a lot when we compare the Gospels in the New Testament, because they have a lot of the same stories, except for some of the details are different and some of the ways that they approach them are different. And so you say, oh, the Bible contradicts itself. It's like, no, actually, that's confirmation that it actually is true. Because if all of them are telling the exact same story, they call that collusion.
Yeah. And you wouldn't need 66 books.
Well, and the fact that they differ yet overlap is more evidence that they're true than if they all said this exact same thing.
Because it's very personal that way.
Yeah. And I'm going to remember, a multitude of angels, and you're going to remember two. Right. And I'm going to remember one. And, I mean.
So forth, yeah.
And so, but the fact that we're all describing the same scenario.
Right.
Did Jesus freaking feed the 5,000? Yeah. Did he? Were there 12 baskets left over? I don't know. Maybe there were 9.
I wasn't that infatuated with the baskets. Okay.
I wasn't looking at the baskets. Okay. I was standing over there. And so it's the same thing with these near-death experience accounts. They all have very
commonalities.
But yet they're all different.
Yep.
You were talking about, seeing God. Well, there's a couple of accounts that he lists in this book that they saw the same light, the same God, heard the same voice, and yet after they came to and thought about it a little bit, they would say, oh, yeah, that's my God. That's the God of my religion.
Yeah.
Except for the God of their religion is not described anything like the God that they saw.
Right. Yeah.
But they're just kind of clinging on to what they know.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of those kinds of things too, where, actually they didn't see their own God, but that's kind of what they're going to go with.
Yeah.
It's also interesting the way you said that he described heaven, because I've watched a lot of interviews with people and they all described heaven in ways, they all use the phrase, I can't quite explain it. There's colors that I had never seen before. That it's like a giant organism.
Right.
It's crazy the way that happens.
Okay. So I've got a little chart.
Uh-oh.
We kind of like charts.
Yeah. We need a whiteboard in here.
So there are these common experiences. So 75% of near-death experience accounts have an out-of-body or a new-body experience. Mm-hmm. Okay, 75%. 57% see deceased family, friends, and or angels. Mm-hmm. 57.
I wonder how they describe an angel.
Well, different people describe them different ways, but many describe them as having wings.
Okay.
But we know they don't have wings.
Do they have a head of a lion? And
no, they're pretty much human. Yeah. But one of them said, actually, a few of them said that they were almost transparent. You could kind of see through them, you know.
Yeah.
So it was almost like you could tell that they were embodying themselves.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
okay, so 45% have evidential observations. You know, they are seeing specific things.
Okay.
45% report telepathic communication or different hearing of some sort. 74% report heightened consciousness, heightened senses, like they can have super hearing, super feeling. 48% a God of light and love. 76% peaceful, positive feelings.
That's a big number.
I know, 76.
That's where your scientists would say that's that dopamine rush
that's
before
right.
you go.
That's right. 56% reported having special knowledge. 34% went through a tunnel. 32% had a life review. 52% knew they were in heavenly realms. 31% saw some sort of border, boundary, gate, wall. Many of them say, I knew that if I crossed that line, I couldn't come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it would be to heaven or hell. So that's 31%. 66% had increased visual perception. 59%, that is actually a pretty large number, told to return or had the choice to return. So you got to go, or do you want to go? 65% saw a light that is love. And finally, 73% had a profound life change.
It's another big number.
That is a big number for profound life change.
Yeah, like it changed
Like
the whole trajectory.
Some of them, that would absolutely mean that they probably were not a believer, and then post this, they were believers.
Right. That's
Well,
it.
I mean, it's kind of speaks for itself. I mean, you take these people, regardless if they're Hindu, atheists, non-believers, whatever, they come out and they have this great positive change, and especially most of them, if I'm not mistaken, you know, turn to the Christian faith, you know, serve the God.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, it's just this, it's just that. If you're going to tell me that someone almost dies and turns to God, I'm going to say that's God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
know.
like you just proved your point for me.
Yeah.
Like it went through all that stuff, and this guy who would not be following God under any other circumstance.
Yeah.
He's just got a new lease on life. He could go do a million other things.
For sure.
Yeah.
But instead he turns to God.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
So who did he see? Who did he meet? They didn't have that experience and then go start messing with crystals.
Right.
You know?
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a very interesting account here that includes a lot of these elements. It's sort of, this is a real account. This woman is a songwriter. She's had songs recorded by Bruce Springsteen, and had songs in movies and Pearl Jam, REM.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and she is a Christian at the time of her near-death experience. Okay, so she had this aneurysm deep in her brainstem. And so they had to, once again, last-ditch effort. It's just like the Frozen Man. Her body was cooled to 50 degrees. Her head was drained of blood.
Oh.
Her eyes were taped shut. She was put under deep anesthesia, and her brainstem activity was monitored with 100 decibel clicks emitted from small molded speakers inserted into her ears.
Ow.
Yeah.
Her entire body, except for the small area of the head they were operating on, was covered completely. So there was no possibility of hearing, seeing, or picking up clues about events in the room. Because it's another thing they said, well, they didn't see, they felt something and their brain knew what it was, or they heard something and the brain, so anyway, there's none of that. She had no heartbeat and no brainwave activity. She didn't recall the start of her surgery. I remember the top of my head tingling, and then I just sort of popped out of the top of my head and I was looking down at my body. It was an hour into the surgery. She's looking at her own body as if perched on her surgeon's shoulder. And here's her words. I remember the instrument in his hand looked like the handle of my electric toothbrush. I had assumed they were going to open the skull with a saw, but what I saw looked like a lot more like a drill. It even had little bits that were kept in this case that looked like the case my father stored his socket wrenches in. I remember distinctly hearing a female voice saying, "We have a problem. Her arteries are too small." The female voice came down from down by her legs, which confused her because it was brain surgery, but it turns out they had to access the femoral arteries in the legs. And so that was later confirmed. She had never met her, nor did she know a female surgeon would be among the doctors in the operating room that day. So he emphasizes that it would have been impossible for a patient to see or hear anything at this point. And even if she had been conscious in any way, the clicking modules in her ears would have prevented her from picking up conversations. So this was actually on MSNBC.
Wow.
I've never seen this. But Dr. Spetzler is the surgeon. He shows the Midas Rex saw that he used, which does look like an electric toothbrush with a long cord. He shows the blades kept in a case that was open during the surgery. It's pretty much exactly what she described in toothbrush form. And it's not something that is visible as you're coming into the operating room, noting that the sterilized saw was not taken out until Pam was more than an hour into the deepest anesthetic state possible. After observing the operation, she sensed a presence and noticed a tiny point of light which began drawing her to it. As she got closer, she recognized different people. I distinctly heard my grandmother call me. I immediately went to her. I saw behind my grandmother uncles, aunts, cousins, a good friend of mine who was murdered young, a distant cousin I didn't know had passed but had. I wanted to go into the light, but they stopped me. They communicated that if I continued to go into the light, I would change and would not be able to get back into my body. So she says, I know for a fact that God exists and permeates everything. So eventually she was told it was time to go back. And as she returned, she heard the surgeons playing Hotel California by the Eagles in the room. She watched the doctors use the paddles to shock her, not once, but twice. When she revived, she reported back to the doctors what she had seen and heard, describing in minute detail the specialized instruments, the conversations, the song, and the two attempts to start her heart. Doctors Sabom and Spetzler confirmed the accuracy of all the details, yet here's the deal. She had no brain waves. Her eyes had been taped shut, and she had 100 decibel clicking in her ears. Okay, so this is the most important thing here, because this can't be a hallucination, because you have to have a brain to hallucinate.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about that one?
I think Dom Felder solo transcends, man.
That's exactly
what
right.
I got out of it.
That's exactly right.
I was going to say, that's a good tune there, you know?
Well, and this is a musician, so
Yeah.
she would know that song.
Yeah.
very
And
well.
you're trapped, Hotel California, they're trapped in there. Now, what did the doctors think about it?
Yeah, that's my thing.
Did they play stubborn doctor still, or did they say, okay, there's got to be more to this?
They actually, I mean, there was no way for them to
Question that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably how it ended up on the news.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because, I mean, this is like extraordinarily, you know, she's no brain activity. You can't hear, you can't see, the whole nine. Like, there's no way to maneuver around this one.
Right. And
But do they recognize that it's got to be divine in nature?
I don't think they're willing to go there. I think this is a mystery. You know, I mean, you just throw up your hands.
This is slightly off topic, but I'll get the name of it for the next podcast for this documentary. It says basically now, if you bring the name of Jesus into science in academia, you are blacklisted.
Yeah.
You are like cut down, blackballed. You will not teach again. I'll get the name of that documentary.
So, and we'll get to that very point in just a moment. But there was later on a study that centered around this and others, talking about this information identification thing. And this study studied 93 near-death experience patients who claimed to make verifiable observations. After investigating all of them, she found that 92% of these out-of-body perceptions were completely accurate.
Wow.
Pretty deadgum good accuracy.
6% contained some error, and less than 2% were completely erroneous.
Less than what?
Less than 2%.
Wow.
So this scientist's conclusion is this strongly suggests that a near-death experience cannot be a hallucination, i.e. experiencing a perception that has no basis in reality, like in psychosis. Neither can it be a delusion nor an illusion. Moreover, one needs a functioning brain to experience a hallucination, an illusion, or a delusion. So there you go.
You know, that's something that we never think about. All these people that are brain dead having these experiences, they don't have a functional brain, but we're supposed to believe they're hallucinating.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. Apparently.
I've never thought about that till
I
right
hadn't
now.
either. And either in that one chick, they were like, we're going to remove every possibility.
Yeah.
We're going to
That's what I'm
freeze
saying.
her
Yeah.
head and stuff her ears. You know, tape her eyes. And,
Yeah, her body's going to be 50 degrees.
Yes,
And then we're
yeah.
going to play 100 decibel clicks in her ears.
Yeah.
Don Felder, man, got her.
Yeah. Okay, so what kind of experience do you have? Do you know anybody who's had one of these?
I don't know. Probably the closest thing I could have is and it's not an out of body experience. I guess it'd just be, well, this wouldn't even fall in that category. I'm thinking of I won't reveal any names. We've talked about it on here before, where the guy had the kick in his side.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
the
yeah.
wreck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that I guess I'm just thinking of kind of a supernatural presence that basically at a potential near death moment. Man, offhand.
And so here's another thing. They have documented that there are people that are blind who have been able to see and recognize people in their experience.
See, and that's got to be because they wouldn't even have a clue what they look like.
No,
that's got to be
never seen them with their own eyes before.
Yeah.
Yet this one woman named Debbie, 48-year-old woman who lost her sight at birth, she came back and now she's telling her mother that she met her grandmother. And it's like, how did you know it was your grandmother? I could see her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the closest thing I got to that is my mom, she had a twin brother who died in a car wreck. And shortly after he died, she said that she had a dream that he said that he was in a better place and that he came down and they were through a screen door. And that he was saying, I'm in a better place. If you live your life right, you'll be here with me. And she said they touched hands through the door and he went away.
Well, my grandfather actually had a near-death experience. He was dead. He had a massive heart attack and was dead on the table like multiple times.
Oh, wow.
And he would tell us about this. He said that same kind of thing. He went through this little tunnel thing and then he saw Jesus. You know, he would describe this person as Jesus. And he knew that that's where he wanted to go. He just couldn't wait to get there. And they stopped and Jesus asked him, do you want to go here or do you want to go back? And he thought about it for a long time. And his two youngest kids were still young enough where he said, I really think I probably need a few more years. And so boom, he came alive. And it was interesting the change that he made to his life just physically. A lot of times people get fixed up and they'll have open heart surgery and then they'll do well for a while. But he walked 5 miles a day almost every day of his life after that, and he was very diligent about everything. And
so not only spiritually did he change, but even physically.
But it was like you couldn't get him not to. It's like he was going to be faithful with whatever time God gave him, and he raised his kids. Saw all of his grandkids, and then he had another heart attack, and this time he got to go.
How old was he then?
Gosh, I can't even remember. He was in his 80s, I think.
So he lived a long, full life.
Oh yeah.
Dang, I know. That is wild. Did he describe Jesus?
Just honestly, he just could recognize Jesus. He didn't say, I don't remember if he ever said he had a white robe or any of these other things that some people say, but he just said Jesus met me there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it was just a perception.
He didn't have a sword coming out of his mouth.
Didn't.
Blood-covered robes.
Didn't have a tattoo on his thigh or nothing. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny that you said that, though, about your grandfather. Do you think we take that for granted that us being, humans, we're three-part beings? Do you think that God wants us to know that we need to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually?
Well, we all should know that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're called to be good stewards of what we've been given and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we also know that we have, conditions and maladies and injuries and things that we have to live with.
Well, even if you're broken, you can still take care of yourself.
That's right.
The best you can.
That's right. Yeah. But I think when you meet Jesus and he says, hey, I'm going to give you a little more time.
Yeah.
Then I think all of that comes into clear
I'm going to
focus.
optimize.
Yeah. I'm going to cherish this.
Yeah. Or you're like, if you don't have like awesome family back home and you're like, no, I don't want to go back. And he sends you back. Then you're like, I'm going to eat like crap and I'm not going to take care of myself at all.
You know what else is interesting about
I don't
these
want to be
two?
here anyway.
I'm going to start smoking.
Is in all of these situations, at least that I've come across, when people have the opportunity to come back, they have the choice to come back or not. And when they make a decision, it's like, well, I have small children at home.
Right.
It's completely selfless. It's not a selfish decision that, I want to stay here in heaven. It's someone needs me.
Yeah.
Right. But and so you could get into this sort of existential philosophical question then. It's like, okay, well then, so does everybody that just goes on and dies, did they choose that? And I don't really think that's the case.
I think that's why it's called near death.
Right.
Because God's like, you ain't quite, you're
They're
not
only
dead
mostly
yet,
dead.
sucker.
Only mostly dead.
So I'll let you finish it out if you want to stay.
Yeah.
And I think we also kind of get into this area of, the greater glory.
Yeah.
This is stuff we don't understand.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think that I don't think everybody gets a choice, as they're making the, crossing the bridge. But, I think there are times when God says, no, I'm not going to intervene in this because there is a greater glory somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
also, too, I think it depends on the way you die as well. Because, I mean,
Maybe.
like, if someone has got their head blown off, that's, I don't think, that's any other option there.
Yeah, if I trip and
But
fall into a
but you
wood
like
chipper.
But like, well, that's why most of these stories happen on an operating table where there's a possibility of saving someone's life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's some that happen that's not on the operating table and whatnot. But it just makes sense to me that way. But then again, what makes sense to me doesn't mean it's true. It's just the way I wrap
well,
my
I mean,
brain around
obviously, if your whole body's burned, you're not coming back into your body.
Right.
Yeah.
Jesus says, "Welcome home."
Yeah.
it. If there's nobody to go
Yeah.
back to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the one we told several weeks ago about the guy who jumps off the building and he regrets it. He says, "God forgive me," and God says, "I forgive you." I'll
See you in a minute.
See you in a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, see, that's what really caught my my mind about this story over here is that this guy was in a body bag. Like, they had done zipped him up. He was cold to the touch when they came in, like declared dead upon arrival,
I did a sermon years ago, and the opening story, it was about heaven and eternity and everything. But this happened maybe, I don't know, maybe the 50s or the 60s, somewhere in there. And this guy was actually declared dead. They had the death certificate and everything, and they put him in the morgue. And they pulled him out to do an autopsy.
He sits up. What are you doing?
But
I was going to say, that dude crapped his pants.
oh,
It was in there.
absolutely, because
I'd quit my job.
Yes.
But he describes that the fact that he actually was aware, and they were about to cut him open, and he could feel the scalpel.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and so then he twitched, and then they're like, so yeah, he lived. Whew. I know.
I'm telling you, man, that dude, the dude, the coroner or whatever they are, that had I guarantee that man had nightmares the rest of his life.
Could you imagine like getting
Yeah.
a Y incision and then like his heart is still beating?
Yeah.
And he's like, stop it.
Can we sew this up real quick?
Yeah.
Well, and he probably was without a job too.
Yeah.
Unemployed.
Yeah.
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 My near employment experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. And this, they have some crazy stories in here. One girl, her head was bitten 3 times by a lion.
Wow.
Yeah.
So her head nearly was blown off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is kind of a funny one too. This girl, head-on collision, the whole thing. She's above her body, sees all the blood and all the stuff, and they're trying to put her back together. And in the process, she goes out into her soul floats out into the hallway, and she's traveling around the hospital, and she sees her stepdad, who is a health food nut, getting a candy bar out of the vending machine.
Oh, I've heard about that one.
She busted him later on.
Yeah,
She's
I heard about that
Tell me about that $100,000 bar that you got. Yeah. So,
Well, I feel like on that, let's see, I was making sure. So did you want to get on the weird side of it?
yes.
As far as the astral projection.
Yeah. Well, so I want to do one more quick one on to do the hell thing real quick, because this is chapter. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff all kinds of stuff that we could do. But I do want to hit astral projection and out of body experiences that don't involve death.
Yeah.
So in this particular account, there's this airline pilot, and this chapter was focusing on the power of prayer. Okay, so this airline pilot, he actually develops a condition that doesn't allow him to fly anymore. So he falls into deep depression, and he's taken like a bottle of pain medicine at a time.
Yeah.
Like he just chugs the whole bottle.
Wow.
Yeah.
In a suicide attempt.
Well, no, this was just to get by. I mean, his
dang.
habit had gotten that opioid.
Jeez.
Yeah, gotten that bad. And so he actually falls asleep, like he passes out at the wheel of his car, of his truck, and boom, he's dead. And he was dead for quite some time. But in his experience, God, he meets God. It's amazing. He says, I don't deserve to be here. I've lived a terrible life. And God says, yeah, I know. So come on over here and look at this. And I mean, he says it smells like rotten flesh. He just gets into all kinds of detail. And he said, that's exactly where I need to go. But God said, I heard you. And he said, what? Right before you hit, you said, God, forgive me. And I heard you. And he said, so for that reason, and he said, I also want you to know that your family's been praying for you. And it was like those prayers gave God like justice, like the legal right to give this guy a choice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, if that doesn't strengthen your prayer life to some degree,
Yeah.
he goes into a little more detail too about how God just kind of showed him, prayers of all of the people, that every one of them is heard, everyone is valued. He talks about there were angels that had bowls in their hands, and they were going up to the throne room. He said, "What's in the bowls?" It's like, those are tears. And so every tear he said, every prayer is recorded, every tear is brought to the throne room of God. And now I don't know if all that's literal, but that's the way he saw it.
You know what that reminds me of? Remember when we were talking about spiritual warfare, and we were talking about prayer, and when you said it's like cosmic bombs going off? That's exactly what it makes me think of.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And he goes into all kinds of details too. And so anyway, I know we're going to be out of time here in just a minute. So
Dude, I know we could dang near done 2 episodes.
we really could. But it's okay, because I think we've come to the conclusion that whatever this is, it's pretty real.
Yeah. I don't think this is like the aliens. I think we agree on this across
What
the
are you
board.
talking about?
so
It's not
too.
like the aliens.
Yeah, that's still...
It's very real.
No.
Well, yeah, but remember last time Pat was a skeptic and I was in the middle, and you were like
just
all
the far off side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think all three of us on this one are like, yep.
I mean, it's pretty hard to argue with some of these things. The biggest unknown here. Now, obviously, the guy that wrote this book and some of the other research material that we've been looking at, largely from a Christian perspective. Now, so he's going to focus on a lot of these that have very similar experiences. I know that there are a lot of near-death experiences that go horribly bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just terrifying and everything else like that. But what he's trying to get at is, when you look at this from a scientific viewpoint, from a research, if we were researching any other kind of phenomena and we got these kinds of percentages, we would say this is a slam dunk.
Yeah. Closed case. Yeah.
Yeah, most people would call that scientific law.
I mean, he goes into scientific law a couple of times in here, and he says, they just won't come out and say it.
Yeah.
There's overwhelming evidence.
Yeah.
So let's get into, for a minute. Okay, so there's a difference, a technical slight difference between astral projection and just an out-of-body experience. Now,
astral projections where you intentionally do it, correct?
Yes.
You're trying to, almost when you try to levitate yourself.
And you're doing it to seek truth and clarity from a spiritual place. Because, if you noticed on these near-death experiences, it said a lot of people what percentage came out with gained clarity and wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so this astral projection, what I researched briefly on it said it was voluntary, and it was with to gain something, which it is interesting to look at the side by side to a degree. We touched on this on the NDEs. I'll use our cool acronym.
Yeah, exactly.
So on those, we talked about oftentimes the people that choose to come back from what we've looked at here, they have family or something. I want to see my kids grow up. They don't choose to have these experiences. The people that are doing the astral projections that are trying to are doing it for themselves. They're seeking clarity, seeking truth for themselves. So it's kind of interesting to think about the differences between them, between a voluntary one and one that is involuntary.
Yes. And, it's interesting because there are some biblical accounts, like Prophet Ezekiel. People are saying, "Oh, Ezekiel was just astral projecting." He saw his visions and everything. And it's like, of course, we know about drug-induced astral projection. All kinds of different places. There.
There's some serious.
But but I mean, if you're trying to do the work of God yourself, we talked about it in the Tower of Babel. We talked about it in witchcraft.
Doesn't go well.
Now, is this like lucid dreaming?
Really similar to that, but you actually exit your body. Like you're viewing your body from above.
How does one figure out how to do this?
Well, you just there's a little community in Washington State. It's way out in the middle of the woods, and it's kind of it's a new age hub, and they will tell you that they can teach you how to astral project.
Thanks.
There is probably some mushrooms we can find out in the cow patties that could probably help you astral project.
For sure. There's a woman named J.Z. Knight, and she lives, I don't know if she still does, but at the time I was living in Washington, she lived in Yelm, Washington, Yelm. And me and my brother used to play a little, it was a roadhouse. It was a dive called the Stop In. Got the Stop In Yelm. And we used to drive past her compound, because she made a lot of money on these crystals and this astral projection stuff.
Okay.
And she had this mansion out there in the middle of nowhere. I mean, she ever tried to sell the place, nobody buy it because nobody could afford it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was her big deal.
So are the crystals a part of this astral projection?
Yeah, it's a part of the whole thing. It's part of the New Age thing. New Age thing is like, seeking your true self from the spirit world.
Oh, man. And see, that's okay. So I got a Bible verse on that.
Okay, good.
First, I've got it pulled up here. I was going to read, I got it pulled up already right here. Paul's vision there, in 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians 12, yeah.
Yeah, 12, and then I'll just start at 2 through 4. Yeah. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago, whether in the body I do not know, or out of the body I do not know, God knows. Such a man was caught up to the third heaven. And I know how such a man, and he emphasizes this point, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words which a man is not permitted to speak. So that's pretty fascinating. But on the other one, let me find it. It is Jeremiah 17:9.
Okay.
And I just thought of that when we were just talking about searching oneself. Not here. All right. The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart, and I test the mind. So, and even to give each man according to his ways, according to the results of his deeds. So it's kind of funny to emphasize or to summarize that verse. It's kind of like, don't go searching for your, like, in yourself. And
what's Disney's message? Follow your heart.
Follow your heart.
Just look inside.
Yeah.
Follow your heart.
Yeah. And I'm in Disney. Don't even get me started on Disney.
Desperately wicked. Desperately wicked. That might be my phrase.
Yes. Desperately wicked.
Desperately wicked.
People do want to know. I'm glad you actually said that, because some of you listen, we have now, like, before it was kind of a little secret thing me and Pat were doing, trying to catch what phrase he'd use, but now we've let too many people know.
They're catching on,
So they're like, what's the phrase going to be? So
it started out with, what did it start out with?
No cap.
Yes, no cap.
Yep.
And then it was sus.
Sus, yeah.
I bet Peter, I was like, there's no way you can fit this into a sermon. And he's like, hold my root beer and watch this.
Well, but that one was so easy because it was a sermon on truth.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
That's easy slip in there.
yeah. And then, of course, the opening chapter of Esther was about the city of Susa. Sus is just right there, Anyway, so every week we kind of, I get the challenge. Certainly you can't use the word malarkey in a sermon.
Or an accumulation of emotional and mental garbage.
But once again, it did absolutely fit because we were talking about trauma. I mean, how do you not, And so it is. I can assure you that all of my sermons are Holy Spirit driven.
Yes.
But we just have we have a little bit of fun with that.
Yeah, it's the highlight.
So what is the phrase? Let's give it to the people.
Well, aren't we going to go with desperately wicked?
Desperately wicked.
Desperately wicked.
Desperately wicked.
So if you hear that in the sermon, you'll know.
Yeah.
It's like you found the Pokemon.
Yep.
Yes.
It's the little egg, man. Yeah. That's the
exactly.
Easter egg.
Yeah. So anyway, the interesting thing about 2 Corinthians 12, he says 14 years ago. Well, what happened 14 years before this? He was beaten and left for dead by the side of the road.
Gotcha.
So this actually might be a near-death experience that Paul is having.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't know if he's in the body or outside the body.
But God knows.
Yeah, God knows. He says it twice.
Yes.
Yeah.
For I do not know.
Yeah. And he's caught up into the third heaven, paradise, which is where before the new heaven and the new earth at the end of all time, that the righteous go to paradise.
Mm-hmm. All right, I was going to ask because I try to ask any of the questions I could think that. I mean, I have these questions, and I try to think of what everybody else could have.
Yeah.
What would you? So the third heaven. Explain the third heaven.
Remember
there
when
are three heavens.
Yes, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yep.
So we went back to the spiritual warfare series. We know that there is the atmosphere, the sky, the clouds, and then there is the universe, outer space.
Yep.
And then there is the place where God dwells.
Yeah.
Celestial
place God
heaven.
made for Himself. And so the spirit world actually operates in all three, but the battle is being fought, in the second and third heavens.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And sometimes it gets played out on earth through humans.
Yeah.
So when he says the third heaven, that's what he's communicating to them, is that he was caught up into that spirit world
Yep.
Gotcha.
that nobody else gets to occupy.
Yep.
So it's like he died and went to heaven.
Yeah.
It's kind of you could read that into it. Let's put it that way.
Where would the new earth fall when that time comes for the new earth? Where is it?
That is planet Earth.
Okay.
It is absolutely planet Earth.
Heaven and earth become one.
It's God's creation restored. So perfect. Yeah, I'm not going to get into it because I've gone. No, I'm not going to go down.
Are we going to have to? Are we going to do an episode on the new earth and
For
all
sure,
that?
absolutely.
Let's just then let's save
eschatology.
it for that.
We will. We
All
will definitely save.
There you
that.
go. There's your teaser.
But
for me too.
Yeah,
I'm already
new heaven,
pumped.
new earth. They come together again.
Okay.
They're not separated anymore. And then the new city, Jerusalem, comes down and occupies that city, Jerusalem. There's a lot of people say, "Oh well, what are the dimensions of the city, and how big will it be? Will it hold everybody?" It's like it's symbolic for the church. The church, God's people, come back to inhabit the earth.
God's not out there with a tape measure.
No, he's not going like, okay, we need 8 in this block over here. And, I think I can fit the Mormons in over here. It's like,
we got Methodist Square, Baptist Circle.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Pentecostal Lane.
It means that we will inhabit the earth as we were meant to inhabit the earth. Okay, so
Is that a lane so they could do backflips down it? Is that why you said the Pentecostal lane?
That's right. Yeah, they need a little extra room.
It's great when things work out, though.
Yeah, and we got your flagpoles over here. Here's your anointing oil.
As long as the snake handlers have like their own separate shut
They
off.
do. It's called Georgia. That's where they'll be.
That's exactly right. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting imagery with that, but it could have been a near-death experience.
Yeah.
Now
That's awesome.
But if you fast forward in the last few minutes that we have, if you fast forward to Revelation, though,
No S, right?
no S, no
Revelations.
S, no cap, no S.
Look, man, I'm not gonna lie. That is like my pet peeve when people put an S on Revelation.
There are not multiple revelations. It's one revelation, and It's not the revelation of the Antichrist.
That's right. It's
Not a
revelation of
revelation
Jesus Christ.
of the beast or of the end times or of prophecy or anything else. It says it right there in the very first verse. The revelation of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
That's all it is, and that's what it is, and that's how we need to read it. But in Revelation chapter 1, he says it's the revelation that God gave John to show things which must shortly take place. And the first thing that happens to him is he says, here's a voice behind me, a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet. And I turned to see the voice.
How you do that?
How you do that?
See a voice?
That was speaking with me. So is it a trumpet? Is it a voice? Is it a person? Is he looking at a trumpet? He's seeing a voice. Okay, so this starts this long vision. Mm-hmm. And so how did he get there? He says, in verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Or, more correctly translated, I was in spirit on the Lord's day.
So out of body.
Out of body, in spirit. So there are many accounts of people having out of body experiences that don't involve death.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that is a whole other little subcategory. But these experiences are very similar. Mm-hmm. People are just, in fact, I know of one particular case that's actually listed in this book where this young girl, 7 years old, is severely traumatized. And she was groomed and kidnapped and abused. And during her abuse, as the abuse was happening, Jesus came to her. She was lifted out of her body. She could see her body. She could see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so some people say, well, that's just, that's just kind of a
coping mechanism.
Escape mechanism. Yeah, something like that. Your psyche sort of takes over. But she had no knowledge of Jesus before this. She knew it was Jesus with her. Jesus was, and you say, oh, well, why don't Jesus just bash him over the head? We'll get into all that stuff another time. Suffice it to say that Jesus was with her, and then later in her life, Jesus came to her again and helped her heal from all of this.
So do you think it's safe to say that traveling in the Spirit is a divine thing, and to astral project is to do it on your own strength,
it is,
which would be demonic?
Okay, so
that's what I would think. Yeah.
And let's make this connection because, God says, come to me, I'll come to you. It's all on my terms. You submit to me, you surrender to me, you get the advantage of my presence, my power, all this stuff that goes with it.
Yeah.
People who then in the Tower of Babel days, they say, I don't want to submit to anybody. I don't want to do what you want me to do. I want to do what I want to do. I want to have power. I want to have influence.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna through my own human efforts, I'm gonna take bricks and mortar and I'm gonna summon these other gods. They're not as powerful as the real God,
but they offer a good bit.
They're more powerful than other humans.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna do this myself.
No.
And it didn't go well then, hasn't been going well ever since, and it won't go well now.
See to me, because I would classify astral projection into the occult.
For sure.
And it's, of all the things I feel like we talk about, we always mention dabbling in the occult is extremely dangerous.
It is.
Man, I can't think of much more dangerous of a thing. If you actually could manually or voluntarily remove your soul from your body and enter that side, what a dangerous thing to be doing,
now,
like especially.
When we covered witches remember we talked about the lady who could astral project.
Yeah.
And she could see homes that she couldn't see into.
That's right.
Because they were covered.
Because they were blanketed.
Yeah. And so I wonder, this ties directly to that, right?
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
You can cloak it in a lot of different costumes, because people will say, well, it's New Age. It's the gentle religion. It's not really even a religion. You're just kind of getting in touch with spirituality.
Yeah.
But if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck.
Exactly. There are only two places that spirits come from.
Yeah.
and it's one or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't get no neutrality.
Yeah, remember we talk about the black and white and a lot of gray? There's very few things that are black and white, and this is one of them.
This is one of them.
Even white magic was bad magic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the gateway magic, you
Yeah.
know?
It's like eternity. You have two choices.
Yeah.
It's heaven or hell. There's no in between.
Yeah. No.
You know?
So if you're connecting with the spirit world under your own power, that's why we talked about all these other, Ouija boards and, stuff like that. That stuff is, there's some real stuff to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want
Playing with fire.
You don't even want to hang the bolt by the thread and ask a question.
You know what? I wanted to do that so many times, but I was like, oh, man,
I know. I don't know if I want to mess with it.
Yeah.
So then is the old looking for the water, the well, and you walk around?
I don't know.
Is that demonic?
I don't know. You maybe you're contacting the underworld. You're asking the water god to show you where the well is.
If you contact the underworld, I'm going to have to contact my underpants.
Exactly.
Because I'm going to have to change them.
That's exactly right.
I don't mess with it.
I know. And then, we were talking about those alien sightings where they come up from the water, you know?
Ain't got no use for it.
No, I'm currently on the Bible Project podcast. I'm in a series where they're talking about the chaos monsters.
Okay.
Man, you told me about that last
the
week.
sea dragon and the land snake.
Nice.
And the creatures of the darkness, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like it.
It's just like the Elohim Divine Council. Once you see it, you will never see it the same again.
Dude, that's how the Nephilim stuff we talked about. Like, there's so many things that I've watched even on YouTube now, like, again, in my weird watching now, and it'll be a non-Christian person doing this video. Not unbeliever, non-Christian person. It sounds weird to say. An unbeliever making the video, and they'd be talking about some weird thing that happened back in the course of time. And I'm like, I feel like the old Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's like got his feet up and he's like pointing to the TV, and I'm like, it's the Nephilim, or it's the Elohim, or not the Elohim. It's the fallen angels. I'm like, that's what it is.
The biggest aha moment I got so far out of this series is David and Goliath.
Yeah,
because the motif from Genesis 3, God curses the serpent. You're gonna fall. You're gonna crawl on your belly. You're gonna eat dust for food, and you're gonna bruise the heel of the man, but the man will crush your head.
Yeah,
crush your head. Okay, so David has been anointed. So he's anointed. He's going to be the next king. He goes. The whole story about Goliath. He goes and he sinks a stone into his forehead. The stone sinks into the forehead, just like Pharaoh's armies and Pharaoh sunk into the water. Okay, so Goliath is wearing a bronze helmet, nakash, the word for snake.
Really?
A nakash helmet.
Scaled armor.
And he has scaly armor.
Oh man, there you go.
There you go. And Goliath means the man of the in-between.
It's a lot of parallels in
part
there.
Human, part divine.
And then, of course, the lineage, David. So it just shows you
that's what I'm talking about.
So
and here's the deal, though. He falls with his mouth in the dust. Mm-hmm. Snake's going to eat dust. Mm-hmm. And
I just saved the first episode of that because I knew
it's good.
You had told me about it, and I forgot all about it. Doing
And
life.
David cuts his head off with his own weapon, and it's all about the head.
Yeah,
and once again, how do you kill a vampire? Or cut his head off.
Yeah,
right. Same kind of thing with the snake. He's got to cut his head off.
That's pretty awesome. Again, that's the stuff that. Where was this years ago?
I know.
Why did I not? Why am I just now knowing all this stuff?
And what's funny is it's been there for centuries.
Yeah.
We just got to dig.
We're just kind of it's just being revealed. Because it's whatever is being revealed to us now. It's not new information. It's not special revelation. It's God just helping us grow and helping us learn because this is what we need for now.
Do you think that also too we've been relying too much on teaching tradition?
Oh, for sure.
I think so too.
I think God is bringing a generation out, and I think we all are part of that generation. I mean that I don't mean just an age generation, but I mean a people out, and I think that a lot of this is from really revealing Scripture in a new way, in a fresh way. We're not contradicting anything except for false teachings. We are, but I
Which
mean,
is the only way I learned this is the only reason you can be excommunicated from a church.
that's exactly right. False teaching that will get you canned.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, near-death experiences. I think my position is these are gifts from God. That either it's to turn your life around or to give you a witness
Yeah.
of something that you know now to be true.
Yeah. That's where I would stand. I mean, and before I would almost, when I was thinking about, all right, why would you get a hellish experience versus this one? And both would be a gift.
Yes, for
they
sure.
would both be a gift.
Absolutely.
Because if I had a hellish experience, then I would clearly be like, I got some changes to make in my life.
Right.
Or I now know these things to be true
Yeah.
about the afterlife. And now I know that God's going to use me to share that with somebody.
I think that's a better perception of it as God reveals the truth, whether it might be scary or glorious.
Yeah.
God reveals the truth, and either way, the truth points out God.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Like
agree.
that's your one option.
Yeah.
You want to live in the truth?
The interesting thing too is there are times when some of these accounts sound like just a B Hollywood movie. You
Yeah.
know, like the images are almost kind of cheesy and things
Yeah.
like that. I believe that God shows us in
Our context.
our context. That's a good way to put
and
that.
I think scripture's that way.
Yeah, ways that we can understand so that we can explain it.
So what you're saying is, if I had one,
You're gonna have aliens,
Jesus would have the
dragons,
sword coming out of his mouth and be in a blood-soaked robe,
Yeah.
and Metallica would be playing in the
Master of
background.
Puppets is going,
and I'd be like, "This is heaven. This
Yeah.
is heaven. This is not the hellish view. This
Yeah.
is heaven."
That's it. That's it.
Hell would be like Kenny G.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah, Kenny G and Michael Bolton, 24 hours a
Oh yeah. That would be pretty hellish right there.
day. Yes, and
Heaven's got Don Felder, man. You know, just going off on guitar. We got Hotel California.
Hotel California. All right. So drop us some questions in the comments. We can address those at the beginning of our next episode, or we can answer you personally if you
Yeah.
want us to. You know, we got time.
Yeah, we will respond to any method you reach to us.
For sure.
And drop us a topic. Look, I mean, I feel like we've shown pretty well. There is no topic
That's right.
we won't
Yeah.
right.
tackle.
Yeah.
And so drop a topic in there. If you got a question or a topic that's just on your mind and you're like, man, I just wonder about this, or whatever you want us to explore, we are game.
I almost want to set up a P.O. box. If you just want to write in anonymously.
I know,
we'll take care of it.
anonymously, yep.
Yeah, just don't let there be too much ambiguity.
No ambiguity.
Yeah.
But we are going to have our own email address here pretty soon.
There, see, and I think that should help because there is some people that probably have some weird question, but
Yeah.
they just would be a
agree.
little embarrassed to put on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
So I know that in the near future we're going to address some of these taboos or legalisms that have been very controversial over the years. We'll probably address foul language.
Yep.
You know, is that
Cursing,
okay? Gambling,
drinking.
things like that.
Yeah.
Getting tattoos. We're gonna get that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're all sinners.
We might go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might record. We'll get a tattoo while drinking a little bourbon and maybe even drop a cuss word.
Hey, look, I got dibs on the tattoo. Look, I've
Well,
been
I
meaning
feel
to
like
go.
you got the head start. I feel like Brother Peter needs to get the tattoo.
I probably, maybe I do.
I think
Maybe
you need
do.
like something now that you're lifting. You know, like get something like some barbed wire
Yes.
Yeah,
or like a bald eagle.
like a neck ring or something like
sleeve.
that. Yeah,
A full sleeve.
there you go.
A neck
There you
tat.
Yep.
go. That's what I need.
That's what he needs.
Yeah.
I need a snake that's
Yeah.
crawling up my neck.
Getting its head crushed by a heel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, thank y'all. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, share it, do all the things.
We will come back at you next week.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Have a good Thanksgiving.